Well, you know, very glad to be here this morning. And I was thinking during Ibrahim's excellent presentation there that he was given a really effective commercial for citizen science. And you know, I don't want to depart too much from that. I'm going to give you a commercial for sanitary surveys. And the reason I don't mind being, you know, this blatantly advocative for sanitary surveys is because it's something that I'm a real booster of. And it's a low-tech, low-cost, high-effectiveness measure that needs to go with whatever else you do in terms of identifying sources of contamination in your watershed, and as a step to improving water quality in your watershed. This is the freedom slide. I don't speak for the whole EPA, and EPA has not looked, the whole of EPA has not looked at my presentation. So we've just got me today to blame, and maybe my immediate supervisor and her boss who reviewed this presentation. Okay, I'm going to give you a little background about the Beach Act, which is what the Beaches Environmental Assessment and Coastal Health Act of 2000 stands for. And this is a beach monitoring and advisory program. And this bill, obviously passed in 2000, required studies of pathogen indicators in coastal waters. Now, time for a quick digression. Pathogen indicators, the bacteria that we are addressing, measuring, and studying in this program are fecal indicator bacteria, which I'll mention again in a little while. They're not something that makes you sick. They're something that's in the fecal matter of all vertebrates and shows up in various concentrations in waters. It's a rough indicator and of a proportionality of fecal contamination of some type in water. And the type of contamination we're most concerned with is human fecal contamination. So just wanted to get that clear. We're not talking about, when we say bacteria, we're not talking about bacteria that are going to make you sick. The fecal indicator bacteria are indicators of probably viral pollution that could make you sick. Okay, the criteria that came out of these studies were the numbers of fecal indicator bacteria in water that constitute thresholds for when you might get sick. Above a certain concentration, and it varies by whether it's Enterococcus, which is one of the two fecal indicators, or E. coli, which is the freshwater indicator that would be applicable up here in Clear Lake and your adjacent streams. Concentrations of those organisms by culture that indicate a level concentration that could make you sick. The other thing that the Beach Act does, we give grants to states, to 35 states, tribes, and territories to conduct this monitoring during their swimming season. California receives about $500,000, which is not a great proportion of its total investment in this. They put about 5 times that much into beach monitoring at the state government. Other states that have lesser amounts of beaches, our grants provide all the money that they use for monitoring.
Can I ask you about that?
Sure.
So the $500,000 is an annual amount that the state of California gets from
Yes.
EPA?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you know if that trickles down to local, or how do we follow?
Very much so. Very much so. Most of the monitoring is done at the county level or other water districts in the state. Maybe you know more.
This is through the beach grant, and it's all marine. The stuff what he's talking about right now, it's all coastal marine beaches.
It's all coastal marine.
Yeah.
The Beach Act applies only to coastal and Great Lakes waters, nothing inland, nothing upstream of the mouth of a river discharging into the ocean or Great Lakes. So here in inland areas, you're on your own. But we do support water quality in inland waters as well as coastal waters, but not with grants. And that's what we're here for today, is to support your efforts. The states and local governments do monitoring, usually on a weekly basis, sometimes more frequently than that. And at the end of the year, the states are required to tell us how many advisories they posted. That is, advisories are issued when the bacteria count exceeds the thresholds in the criteria, and how often that occurs, and then what the actual water quality was here in your waters. We were required under the Beach Act to come up with new recreational water quality criteria, that is, use the studies that we conducted to develop new thresholds based on the risk of illness, and there are a lot of epidemiological studies that went to support that. And we came up with some great, we spent, I don't know how many $1 million, spent 10 years, not 10 years, about 5 years doing this criteria. And what we did, came up with for all that money and time, was some new acronyms. Actually, GM is not a new acronym, and the acronyms are explained at the bottom of the page. But with the GM, the STV, the BAV, and I already told you about FIB, which is fecal indicator bacteria, just to make sure you're aware. The GM is the geometric mean, which is a way of expressing the average water quality. The STV is a maximum amount for daily use and also for water quality standards. Beach action value is a lower daily maximum that's included in the beach monitoring part of the criteria. And just to confuse everybody, the new criteria provided two levels of risk, one at 32 per thousand illnesses per thousand swimmers, and one at 36. The new criteria also had FIB thresholds for qPCR. That's the last acronym in here. That's quantitative polymerase chain reaction. And if you go home and practice that, and so you can spit it out real fast, everyone will say, oh yeah, he's smart. qPCR, quantitative polymerase chain reaction. So it's essentially just a molecular method. I think maybe every time I say qPCR, it will go off, right? Anyhow, that actually is a big deal. The molecular methods of measuring the quantities of indicator bacteria in water. The old methods are all culture-based methods, and culture is you essentially one way or another put it on an agar plate or use something slick like Eric has here, that are kind of culture-derived methods, but it takes time. It takes 24 hours at least, and so the results that you get using culture method are yesterday's results. So you find out today that maybe you shouldn't have been swimming yesterday, and that's not so good, and also the opposite. You should have been swimming, but didn't. So the molecular methods are more rapid. They can be done in 4 to 6 hours. So if you guys get up early, or gals, and get their water quality samples, get them to the lab, they can have results by noon. So when mom and the family roll out there in the station wagon and get ready to pay to go into Huntington Beach, they can either say, water's fine, come on in, or they can say, we have high bacteria counts today, and they put up one of those nice signs with a bar through it in the swimmer. So this is a new age and a new day in beach monitoring, and it's rapidly developing.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So we had actually a qPCR piece of equipment at Big Valley for several months. We were kind of piloting it to see if we wanted to use it for cyanotoxin analysis. And I think that my understanding is qPCRs are used for a lot of different types of analyses.
Including medical uses, all kinds of stuff.
Right, and even GMOs and things. And so for the cyanotoxin analysis, it was provided us information about the number of toxin gene copy counts.
Right.
So I'm wondering with the qPCR, with fecal indicator bacteria, is that providing, it's not providing whether there's, like, it's animal versus human, but it's providing some other, is it actual, what's the fecal level?
It can do a lot of things. For the actual, for fecal indicator bacteria, they have a gene sequence out of either the Enterococcus or the E. coli organism that is specific to that bacterium, and they, as you say, they copy that enough times through this thermocycler device to the point where they can quantitate that. There are technologies for microbial source tracking where they have another gene sequence from another organism, from Bacteroides. They have specific gene sequences for human, for other species, canine, ruminant, horse, bird, and they can do a pretty good job. There's a couple of very good ones for human identification that they can be sure that it is a human source, or if not, they can characterize it. So these are other uses of qPCR. qPCR is really good because it can identify these genetic sequences, whether they are alive or dead, if they come through a wastewater treatment plant, or if they've been around a while and are no longer viable for culture, they can still be measured. So it's a very powerful technology, and I'm really glad you have that. And if you get people to operate it, you can do all kinds of things.
Well, we decided to return it only because the amount of time it would take and the cost of the supplies it would be cheaper to actually get. There's a lab in Sacramento that
Right.
provides qPCR analysis for $40 a sample, and it's like there's no way we can beat that. Doing
right.
it
It's
ourselves.
expensive. It takes an investment in training and facilities. You have to have a very clean facility because any amount of DNA contamination can screw up your results. That's great, but keep your eye on the technology, and it'll be useful to you in the future, I'm sure.
And so the Beach Act update is again just for coastal, so marine environments.
No.
Those water quality criteria don't apply.
No, they do apply. They do apply to all waters.
Oh,
The only
okay.
thing that's coastal and limited is the grants.
Oh, okay.
And if I could jump in, for the technology, I have some I have some videos on YouTube. I host a webinar series, and so we have some MST videos. But coming up next month, I have a webinar on lab methods, and then I think it's February, molecular source tracking of FIB contributions, as well as disease detection, actually looking at the viruses.
Nice.
The company is developing robotics, really cheap. If you already have your thermocycler, for like another couple $1,000, you can get this robot, and it will handle all the pipetting and everything else for you. So the technology is moving so quickly that I'm not even asking them for an abstract until January. So neat stuff. So they don't want to take your sample, they want to help you process your sample. So there's some really neat stuff going on. And then for California, the State Water Resource Control Board is updating their water quality objectives for bacteria. And 2 weeks ago, a week ago, we had the webinar on that. So it will go online next week. I'll edit the video and it'll be available. Introduction to policies and programs, and then also what's happening with our standards. Michael Jurdy, who handles that for the state of California, he's retiring. And so it's kind of an update on where we're at and who's taking over from him. So we'll have all that available for you. So there's a whole lot happening right now, policy-wise, resource-wise, and for objectives happening in California. So it's a good time to be looking at water contact recreation.
Is there a listserv that, where this information?
There's a lot of listservs.
I know, believe me, but, I mean, for this in particular,
Yeah, and I'll bring up some slides,
okay.
and you'll have that. But for right now, I'll just point out that under the California Water Quality Monitoring Council, we have a Safe to Swim work group. And there's sign up for that. We also have an inland waters work group that's new, that's been sponsored by SWAP. And then at state board, you can sign up for the water quality objectives updates. And we have that for water contact as well. So there's just multiple listservs. You want to be on all of them because not everybody has administrative access. And so they send them an email, and it may not go out to all of the listservs that it should go to. And so what happens is, somebody will say, oh, I sent it out, can you forward it? And so it could be a week's delay because we're all busy. I only have administrative access to like 4, so I can't cover the other people. They're in different agencies, different divisions of our agency. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you, Eric. The criteria having come out in 2012, we're now doing a 5-year review of that. So much water has gone under the bridge, and in the meantime, we have to make sure that the science that we based the 2012 criteria on is up to date, and we'll see about that. Right after we did the criteria, we came out with new beach guidance and required performance criteria for the grants. For states that get the grants, that's important. For everybody, the beach guidance is good. There's a lot of really good science in there. We came out with that in 2014. Among other things, required a tiered monitoring plan based on the level of beach use, the number of people that are at the beaches, and the risk of FIB threshold exceedances. If you never have any water quality problems, you don't have to expend too many resources in monitoring that, just some kind of maintenance monitoring. If you have variable water quality on a daily or weekly basis, you need to spend more money monitoring those beaches, especially where you have a lot of people. We also stress the toolbox approach to beach management, not just water quality monitoring, but these other things, including the use of qPCRs we've discussed, predictive models, and sanitary surveys. There again, closing around, we've talked about some high-tech, expensive stuff and approaches. Sanitary surveys is the low-tech, and it's a lot of bang for your buck. Okay. Now, getting back to the beach monitoring program, it's the coastal one, but inland communities can have it too. When you're monitoring for water quality at a beach, it provides information on the risk of illness from recreational contact with water. It's specific to a given beach where the sample is taken, and it allows the public to make a choice about whether to swim that day, or whether not to swim, or whether to swim somewhere else. Putting it in a picture here, we got I love these things that come, free with PowerPoint. Makes you look like you've got grad talent or something. There's the monitoring and advisories informing the choice. The risk of exposure is the next step, and that's what the goal is to reduce the risk of exposure to these elevated pathogen concentrations, and then the public ends up swimming in more healthier waters. And there's actually more that's going on in the background here. Yeah, monitoring and advisors inform the choice. And then when you have an exceedance, it tells you that there is a source of these fecal indicator bacteria. They don't show up under a cabbage leaf. They don't come in on a bad moon. They are indicative of a source of contaminated water entering the water that you're monitoring from a knowable, maybe not known at the time, but it's all something that you can find out, you can discover if you see. Sanitary survey is actually when you go out, you step in a boat in a car with a windshield, looking for the source of the contamination. It's sometimes called a sanitary survey, sometimes called a sanitary investigation, but you're out looking for it because you need to find it and you need to characterize it. You're getting something that is causing elevated FIB concentrations at the beach. What does that mean? Is there a stable up there and somebody's putting the horse poop over the fence? Or is this human contamination from sick people, from fecal matter entering the water that is putting people at risk exposed to it? Once you've targeted it and figured out what it is, you can do things about it. If there's a water course running in there, that can be diverted and put in an infiltration area. When you find these things, you don't have to live with them forever. And people can monitor and just, oh yeah, it's up again today. And don't go out and look for this. It's kind of, you know, I wish I'd stopped that sooner. When you do stop it, when you do something about it, lo and behold, water quality improves. And that means there's fewer days with the exceedances of your water quality thresholds. And then you start the whole cycle back over. And it builds. Water quality gets better over time when you apply this process. Just a little step back. There's more water quality than the number. To emphasize, everyone should be clear that it's human sources of fecal indicator bacteria that contain the pathogens, which are usually human, enteric, that's from your gut, viruses. It's not the bacteria that make you sick, it's the viruses. It's more often than not, it's norovirus. If you want to look up something and find out about what can make you sick, I've had norovirus. You can also get it through contact. It's an environmental contaminant. When they have those terrible things on board cruise ships, when everybody gets sick, it's usually norovirus. So it's common, it's human-oriented, and it's a problem. Human sources can be wastewater treatment plants that aren't working that well, or wastewater treatment plants do a great job of killing bacteria. Well, that's their indicator bacteria. They don't do such a good job of killing viruses. So you can have situations where you're not getting very many indicator bacteria measured, but people still get sick. Septic systems, broken pipes, illicit connections to stormwater infrastructure, human sources. We saw some really interesting stuff. In fact, it was kind of an eye-opener for me, the stuff we did in Southern California is, people, I guess you could term them homeless people. It looked to me like some of them had pretty good homes. They were just squatters. They were illicit homes. And, they have sanitary impacts. They also have sanitary exposure to themselves. So it's a complicated thing, and that's definitely a potential source of
Can I say something?
Sure.
About because it's thought might be interesting folks. About 5 years ago or so, we did we looked at all of the sanitary sewer overflows that happened in the Clear Lake watershed that have been reported to Cal OES, I think. And so we pulled those and mapped it and basically identified that in the Clear Lake watershed, over like a 7-year period of time, there was about 7.5 million gallons of treated effluent or raw sewage that had entered the water course. Because on the form it does say to enter water course. And then there was 140 spill events. So it was just really interesting to track that. And the other thing we were looking at was whether they had done water monitoring, or they had done monitoring after the spill to see what the level of, fecal coliform was. And there were only like 8 of the 140 times had they done that. So it was a way to kind of identify. And then in mapping it, we also saw where the hot spots were. As a matter of fact, where we're going on a field trip today is one of the spots where 6 million of those gallons came from. But it was, and then PDF, and I keep looking at Linda because she's the one who mapped all of that and pulled all of that together when we got those forms from the state. But it is interesting to see where, the decisions that are made locally about the, raw sewage or treated effluent that is, something that we could be exposed to when these spills happen. And also it helps to kind of identify as there infrastructure needs in terms of, funding needing to go to that plant because of the spills that happen. And that's not even counting the septic. We have like 1,000 septic systems around Clear Lake, and those aren't even monitored at all. But
And then there was anything under 100 gallons it wasn't reported. It wasn't necessary to be reported. So you still had anything that was those smaller incidences that happened where whether it got let go into a tributary or not, it didn't state it. So you may have had 100, 400 more of those events happen that weren't reported because they didn't hit the action level.
Right.
So really that number may be,
It's a low ball.
sounds like it's quite higher. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be sharing the website where you can get the SSO information. And then follow up. Yeah, there was a spill in San Diego County. Plant had a problem. Effluent was going down a creek and entering one of the coastal lagoons. Nobody knew about it. The local citizens monitoring. They went on, there's a normal routine for going out on this particular morning, collecting a sample and, doing their forms. They discovered the spill. They called the hotlines. Okay. They were the only organization with long-term data set for the lagoon. So the Regional Water Quality Control Board used that as their baseline for corrective action. So the responsible party had to continually doing monitoring and remediation until the levels hit the historic lows and were supportive of all the beneficial uses in that lagoon. And that was 100% citizen science, but they had a quality assurance project plan in place. Yeah. And that's all written up in one of the swamp reports. If you'd like it, I can direct you to that report.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, just your tales are most welcome. Infrastructure is the investment that we make in controlling waste, and it's always lagging behind the need. Growth is the name of the game in our society and in our human civilization, and building adequate infrastructure to take care of needs and do it is a big deal. I want to hammer on this point a little bit more. Not all sources of pollution are the same. The risk of illness is the driver here. That is kind of the bacterial number, the bacterial indicator bacteria count, or risk index, gives what the real risk is. Some sources, like the horse poop I just mentioned, it's probably not going to make a lot of people sick, but it can generate just as high FIP numbers as the human sources. So you have to distinguish between the source types. That's a big part of the job. Yes.
Can you distinguish if it is from a single source or if there's multiple sources at play?
That's a very good question. That's almost a $64,000 question. And you can, but it usually takes expensive means of microbial source tracking with different sequences that are specific to a given source. The best way to do it is to look at the source. If you really find the source, you can see where it's coming from. If you can eliminate that source, then you come back and look for other sources. The more information you gather, the more sources you identify, the more comprehensively you do the job, the more you'll be able to address that question. Otherwise, it's doing the high-tech way costs a lot of money and might not give you the results you want. An iterative, on the ground, eyes open, good notes, good field technology approach will probably get you where you want to go soon. if you can identify all the sources, you know, get the ones you think are contributing, and then check your water quality. If they're not all, if the water quality is not good, you're not done yet.
So does the update, the 2012 update, provide thresholds for the different FIB sources then, if they don't all carry the same risk levels?
No. Since every location would be different, our FIB criteria are kind of generic. In an average source, good morning, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Fine, thanks. In an average source that contains some human input, our numbers are kind of integrated averages. But if you have a situation where you are quite certain that birds are your only source, you can develop a site-specific criteria for that. It's a lot of trouble. Not every small town would want to do it, but you know, a large community where there's a lot of beach use might find it worthwhile.
Well, are there numbers that we can rely on of where those thresholds of what causes illness are? I mean,
No, you have to do it on a site-specific basis.
But I mean,
There are typically they use multiples of the criteria. For instance, if on a E. coli criteria where the value is 126, they might do twice that, like 250, something like that, to allow for a non-human source. But it depends, and there's literature, but it's more of a study that has to be done, and we have guidance on how to do this.
okay. That makes sense.
I got one more question.
Sure.
How do you know if it's not something that's naturally occurring? So say you're doing, maybe it's fish poop or something. Do those things, is there a difference? I mean, do you know?
That also is a good
And how do you
question.
mitigate?
There again, if you do your sanitary survey and eliminate the possibility of all human sources, that might be a good opportunity for you. If you haven't been able to hit pay dirt doing a sanitary survey, you may need to have some microbial source tracking tools brought to bear. They're not all high-tech molecular methods. The determination of optical brighteners in detergent can indicate that you have a human source. People are washing their clothes with this water as well as doing their sanitary survey. And there are other indicators that you can use, that you can apply to your water sample to give you some clues in that regard. And I think we'll have some exposure to that later in the day, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about the fish because they're not warm-blooded.
Okay.
So, yeah,
So we're not going to get sick by it, or?
But they don't have.
No, these are indicator. These are just indicator bacteria, yeah. Yeah. When they start dying and doing other types of stuff, then we got some other issues, and there's consumption, and that's a different issue. You know,
But fecal coliform is only going to be found in warm-blooded.
that's all we're worrying about. That's all we test for, yeah.
So that would be birds and wildlife.
Yeah.
I think they're still naturally occurring in nature, so how do you mitigate for those things?
Well, you don't. You know, you can't, if you have a bird problem, you don't go out and shoot all the birds.
Right.
Yeah, it's looking at risk, and we have some ways of managing for that, policy-wise.
For the beaches, when birds are a problem, they're using dogs to chase away the birds. So they're
Beavers can be
Get
a
them to
problem.
nest elsewhere.
yeah.
It seems like in nature, other things in nature aren't a problem because there's things to balance it, like the tules and grasses that use those nutrients and then give us oxygenated clean water. And
We're not looking at those things. We're looking at the bacteria. And so if you have a really productive wetland, downstream for that wetland, you can have bacteria.
yeah,
Yeah. And policy-wise, if the bacteria level is too high, then we have a regulatory responsibility to respond to that.
Yeah.
Even though it's natural, we have to understand and characterize and explain that it's natural. And then have the agencies say, we understand that there's no risk for harm coming to people's health. Yeah.
Well, we found in our water monitoring that where we've had a lot of birds, like down at the point,
A/B testing.
That it's been, only, the fecal coliform was like 23 MPNs per 100 mil, which is, you know, way lower than what the standard is for Rec 1.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't know if people have done any monitoring where there's a ton of birds or a ton of wildlife and how much higher it is, but we kind of characterize that way higher. We kind of characterize that as just background, because that's, you know,
Correct.
that's where the birds are, there's no worries about the birds
Well,
being there.
that's, you make a good point there. If you have a consistent level, it's probably something that's there all the time and is responding to a constant low-grade source.
Yeah. And as Daniel said, hey, it's, you know, they're in the all the toolies are using it, you know.
Yeah.
The manure.
Okay.
Just gotta put us back in that loop.
One more on this. High indicator numbers mean that sources of pollution are present. You have to look for and assess the sources. That's what we've been talking about. You have to do it systematically. You have to do it thoroughly. And starting to segue into the actual sanitary survey process, there's an annual survey, and then there's a more frequent survey, daily or weekly. Or I guess what we've been saying here is when you take water quality samples, do a sanitary survey, a daily sanitary survey, so you can have that data for other uses. Sanitary surveys are part of the process. You identify the source, you characterize the source, you figure out how to eliminate, remediate it, or mitigate it. The water quality gets better. The sun shines more often on your beach, and your children do better on their SATs. It all proceeds from there. When you have improved water quality, and there again, a little bit of deference to the economic aspect of this, and this is the case here in around Clear Lake. The communities count on water quality for people being able to use the water for recreation and other resources, so it's an economic thing. When you have fewer advisories, there is more beach use. More beach use means you have a more attractive community, you get more visitors, property values increase from people buying houses or for the businesses doing better because people are there patronizing the business. And when you get done with this and when you've done work and it's hard work to improve the water quality, there's more enjoyment of the resource and more connection of people to the environment. And that's what we're trying to encourage here is the beneficial use by the population of the resources that we have and we're charged with protecting. There's places where this has happened. Beach water quality has been improved, public health is better protected, and the towns are seeing improved water quality and higher beach attendance and economic benefits. And we've seen it in the Great Lakes, and you can see it right here around Clear Lake. In the Great Lakes, they had the advantage of a lot of good grant funding through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to mitigate situations like this and divert drainage so the stuff isn't impacting beach water quality. You got the bacterial contamination that suggests a public health risk, and when you eliminate that, there's lowering of the risk and removal from the state waters, impaired waters list, the 303D list. States hate to have their waters on those. It's a pain in the neck. It's an administrative nightmare and costs a bundle of money to address. And you can, drinking water sources are another issue. By the way, the drinking water come right out of the lake around here and go to filtration plants?
70% of the county.
Yeah, okay.
Now here, the water's served here, and in other smaller systems are well water.
Is agriculture, does it use withdrawn lake water or groundwater? Looks like they probably have a good aquifer.
It's both, yeah, they pull from the creeks as well, but yeah. Municipal ag is one of the beneficial uses of Clear Lake.
Right.
As well as municipal,
Right.
like going up to.
I thought that might be the case. Lovely looking agriculture right here. This is a situation where there was a bad runoff situation, and they did low-cost remediation. This is a few days with a bulldozer and a grader and some reseeding, changing the runoff flow direction and doing seeding. You can get a lot of water quality benefits with low-tech stuff. And kind of one of the prototypic instances of this is that in the city of Racine, Wisconsin. This is overseen by one of the most proactive people in our beach community in the Great Lakes, who is Julie Kinselman. She did a whole sanitary survey process and increased the economic viability of the city and of the beach. And here's the transformation. That's the way it was in 2002, and that's the way it is now. Everybody out there having a good time, getting in the water, getting wet, and going back and eating pizza at the local joint. And if she were to talk about this, she would say, and I don't normally like to read slides, but I feel as though I'm quoting from kind of the master here. Monitoring and sanitary surveys are like preventive maintenance on your car. This is an analogy I can take. Or routine health screenings. It helps communities identify potential problems before they're out of control and the impacts to human health and the environment are significant. This important surveillance allows communities to take care of problems before the cost of remediation becomes insurmountable, like the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A little economic scenario. This is an economic study done on property values where water quality either improved or was modeled as being allowed to deteriorate, and the effect on real estate values of the improved scenario was that the body of real estate around these lakes, this is lakefront real estate, where the water quality improved. They projected a benefit of $3 billion in additional valuation, whereas on either of the scenarios where water quality deteriorated, the property value loss was much greater in the negative. So, just wrapping up here, monitoring advisories and sanitary surveys indicate and characterize sources. This targets remedial action, big and small. Water quality improves, there's more beach use, communities are enhanced, property values increase, and this increases our connection to the environment, the real human part of it. It's not just all money. Kind of the same type of thing, but a little bit different twist. The identifying the source type is essential. Reducing unnecessary reports of FIB exceedances. If they're all birds, you know, it's not a problem. So we need to nail down which ones are actually indicative of risk. We have to remediate pollution sources where possible, alter the runoff regime, intercept the source influx, redesign beaches, best management practices. We haven't talked about predictive models, and Eric will get into that a little bit more. And developing site-specific criteria where we know it's not a human source, but there are elevated FIB numbers. And then you get to the goals. You do have clean beaches. You do have water quality. It's kind of home free. Everyone knows that California beaches are the best, right? No disagreement with that in this room. Credit where credit is due for the photos and even the main picture of the beach in Maine. This is, of course, me. That's the beach in Maine. And why is there nobody swimming there? It's cold. I swam there that day. Iron Man. I think that's it. Got any questions?
Well, I would still like to better understand, and maybe you could just point me to something online, but if you're talking about fecal indicator bacteria and how it's different sources and there's different risks for the different sources, where to really get a handle on, you know, what those numbers are that have been, at least, that are put out there as the standard, or maybe
there aren't specific standards. There are journal articles where those have been assessed. I could probably plug you into to some of those. I'll make a note here in my extensive notepad here.
But could you 2012 criteria does have numbers for UPCR. It's just not specific to a particular animal.
Yeah.
That you would have to do a site-specific analysis and figure out what particular animal, if it's birds, if it's deer, and come up with a number.
Yeah, we don't have a handy chart that says bird, use this number, cow, use this number.
But if you say reduce unnecessary FIB exceedances, like, you know, if you find out that it's all bird and bird, you know, that threshold is, I don't know, like in my mind, there's got to be some standard for what that FIB threshold is for bird bacteria.
It's site-specific, and you have to do a type of analysis that addresses the site-specific component of it. There's a whole process called quantitative microbial risk assessment that is brought to bear, and it's pretty complicated, and it is very much site-specific. It includes, there are, you know, literature citations on the infectivity, on the risk of different sources of fecal indicator bacteria, but other factors like the distance from the source, attenuation of the source over distance. It's quite site-specific. It's an involved process, but we're actually almost ready to put out guidance on the QMRA process, so it might get more transparent.
Okay.
But it's